Well, Eric wouldn't want me to say that about him, and I didn't want him to say that about me, but thank you. Thank you, Eric. Well, good morning, church. So glad to see all of you. Some new faces. I'm very glad to meet you. If I haven't had a chance to talk to you, I hope we'll have lots of time and don't run out. We're try to be a church where we hang out and we fellowship, and we're not in a hurry, but if you are, we won't hold that against you. It's great to be back. It is really great to be back. 3 months is a long time to be away. I mean, if you were away for 3 months, I would miss you. It's a long time to be away. I mentioned last Sunday during the luncheon, the sharing time, that this sabbatical was not something that I deserved. It's not something that I really earned. Or really, it wasn't really something that our church could afford, really. But it was a real gift. It was a gift that I desperately needed. I needed to really get my soul healthy, and because it wasn't. So thank you very much. Thank you for your prayer and your support. I want to thank some people specifically, starting with, only in air quotes for now, we'll see, but not elderly, okay, but Elder Eric, thank you so much. Eric really stood in the gap in a very significant way in his leadership and preaching, overseeing the preaching team, and so many other ways. For Stephen, we're unofficial title, the Benedictor. Steve, thank you so much, Steve, for preaching the first messages in a very long time, I think. And hopefully we'll see more of you, and giving so much. Weston's not here this morning. He's traveling, but he really did a lot. And Elliot and Charity do so much. So really grateful for Elliot and Charity, and Alan and Angie showing up early, and all of you. Karen, yeah, of course, Karen. Karen was on there. Somehow I went from Weston to Elliot and skipped Karen, but Karen, our esteemed treasurer. And thank you. All of you who showed up, all of you who encouraged and set up chairs and just were here, and I'm just really thankful. I don't mind the fan, but if it's cool enough and we want to turn that off, I don't know. Are we okay, or we want to keep it on? I don't need it, but anyway, we can keep it on. Anyway, just wanted to mention that. You showed up for each other, you served, you gave, and really continued to act like a family on mission. And I pretty much knew that would be the case. I was confident. I was sharing with my new friend Paul that I was so confident in our team that even if the worst thing happened, there would be some people that would come and sing and worship the Lord and hear God's word, and that's really what it's all about, and then living on mission. So having said that, this isn't going to really be a normal sermon this morning. I do hope that my preaching will be a little bit different and better in some ways as we move forward, based on the things that are kind of going on inside of me. This is not primarily a report on what happened, although I will share a little bit of some things that happened. Feel free to ask. There's no secret. It's not because I want to keep things from you. But really this morning, and what I hope will be in an extended way, this is an invitation to what I found. And because I think that most of you are probably carrying some version of what I was carrying. So here's what surprised me most on sabbatical. It wasn't restful. The theme was rest and slow down. It wasn't restful necessarily because I did less, although I did less. It was restful because I stopped hurrying. They are not the same thing. Busy does not mean hurried. Busy does not equal hurried. Jesus was pretty busy, right? He served among crowds that had massive needs. And he had a very short period of time. Excuse me while I finish my... You never share the words of life with the breath of death, so I apologize, I haven't finished my mint. So awkward, I'm sorry. He had a very short window of time, and his mission, his purpose mattered more than anything in the history of the world. But he was never in a hurry. Think about it. God is sustaining the universe. That's pretty busy. Like when you go to bed tonight, he's got it. all under control. And yet he never skips the Sabbath. He's never, in the history of the world that he created, ever missed the Sabbath. I had long, unhurried mornings. I had full days with my family that weren't rushed. I had a lot of drive time with Emmett in particular as we drove to 10 college football prospect camps. Often driving in silence to Emmett's very big welcomed surprise, because I often drive yapping his ear off about anything and everything he does not care about. But there were a lot of silent drives, which seems to be the point, really. I had a good amount of time reading, mainly soul keeping. I'm going to quote that a bit this morning, and I hope that many, if not all of you, will read that and be changed by it. I listened to a number of biographies about Dallas Willard. Maybe some of you are familiar. You're going to hear me quote him a bit this morning. And a lot of listening and reflecting. And in the middle of it all, I started noticing that God was changing me in ways that I didn't engineer. So here's a story. It's affectionately called the vacuum story. Now, I am somewhat handy, but no one's ever mistaken me for a really handy guy. I'm somewhat handy. The way it usually works is if it's easy enough and I can do it quickly enough, then it will work out. If not, it usually turns into like things thrown against the wall and slammed on the floor and, whatever. We'll get a new one. So we have this Dyson vacuum cleaner that stopped working all of a sudden. And I thought, I'm going to figure out how to fix it. And so I did. Emmett was there. I saw some YouTube videos. Now, as I got deeper into the video, I thought, those are like 5 steps in the middle that I am very unlikely to be able to do. Because you got to pull it apart, and it's got this little computer board, and you've got to be very meticulous. And I'm not meticulous with computer things or small things. So I take it. So anyway, I follow it and get it apart and order the part. And I'm like, this is going to come in 2 days. All I got to do is put this new trigger on and it'll be fixed. So I get the part and then I realize that's not the right part. Okay. All I got to do is order the right part. So, okay, another day or two. Thankfully, Amazon's pretty quick. Get the right part. That's great. And then I realize I don't have the right tool that I need. Now I got to go so I go to Lowe's, of course, and I get the thing that I think is the right tool. I get it home and realize it's not the right tool. So then I got to order the right tool on Amazon. So I go to Amazon and I order the tool and I get it. And in the process of this, I put it together and take it apart a couple times. And in that process, I break it even more than it was. I severed a tiny little wire that you have to be very meticulous not to sever. And I was afraid that I did that. And I get it all back together and then it doesn't work. Got to pull it all apart and order the whole new piece. So the whole process took 10 days. But on the 10th day, Steve, on the 10th day, it worked. It worked. Now, this is not really a spiritual thing, right? There's nothing really spiritual about fixing a vacuum, but there's something that's very spiritual about recognizing the presence of Jesus in the midst of fixing your vacuum cleaner. Now, I almost threw the thing into the floor. Emmett was there. I was like, okay, all right, Lord, okay, you right here? And I didn't. I've been gradually living more slowly, less reactive, and more present gradually. And then there were some hard moments, and some of you have heard this story. Probably one of the hardest moments. Laura and I were in the emergency room with Karis, and she was in agonizing pain from hitting her head at the pool, and she suffered a concussion. And she's sitting in this wheelchair, and I'm not joking. Unfortunately, we have some experience going to the hospital. It's usually with one of the boys or someone else or myself or whatever. But when we pulled in, there's like 5 cars. It was the busiest I've ever seen the emergency room. Packed. We go in, it's packed, long line. I'm carrying Karis. This angel of a lady comes over, brings a wheelchair. I put her in the wheelchair. We're in line to get into the triage. And Karis, was sitting there in this wheelchair, shaking, unable to open her eyes even, and she pulled me close. I was holding her hand, and she pulled me close, and she said, "Daddy, I'm scared." And that really, in that moment, it turned out to be one of the hardest and most important places that I've ever practiced the presence of Jesus. Rest, it turns out, isn't the absence of hard things or hard times. It's a different way of carrying them. We sung this morning this beautiful line, "You've never let me down." And there was a line, I can't even remember what the line was, but it's something like, I go through these trials and I have this peace that passes understanding, the line in that song. And I just wonder how many of us in this last week, we didn't. We had a hard time and we reacted in a way where if someone saw us, they wouldn't notice that we were any different. And that was a lot of my life. Things are good. Oh yeah, things are good. But when things get shaken up, and for me, I've already been confessing this, but for me, control, shock of all shocks, control is kind of an issue. So even this morning, see, last week I came in and I had no stress. There was nothing I had to even worry about. And the Lord made sure when I walked in this morning, I texted this to Steve to pray for me, made sure that I knew I was not in control today. And there were a few moments, probably my sons and others who observed me were like, "Whoa, Ed doesn't seem so different this morning." In fact, after about 4 things like literally broke as we were trying to figure them out, and I'm over here and you can see this table over here as I tried to wheel it. You can see the wheel on the ground if you look closely. And I said out loud, anybody in the room would have heard me, I said, "Okay, Lord, please send me 10 more things. Out of my control here." "Oh, yeah, don't worry, Ed, I'm going to show you." And then, take some deep breaths. Some angels showed up named Angie and Alan, and I took a deep breath. And I had reached out to Steve and Elliot, "Hey, pray for me because my emotions are a little rattled." Rest isn't the absence of hard things. It's a different way of carrying them. Not alone, but with Jesus. I told Karis, I said, "Mom and I are scared too, honey. Mom and I are scared too. But Jesus is as close right now in this moment. He is just as close to you as I am in this very moment." Thankfully, I was prepared. And I highly recommend, there's a book on the back table called Prayers in the Night. I was ready with some prayers on my phone that I could pull out, because I didn't have a prayer ready. I didn't have words, but I was able to pull out a prayer and some scripture, read that. The backdrop to all of this experience that I've been going through is a passage that I've probably read and or heard hundreds of times. It's not going to be unfamiliar to you, but I'm understanding it in a whole new way. And I want to share it with you in the hope that those of you who feel like you are tired and have worn out souls might be encouraged. Not with a cliche and not with a propositional truth. Propositional truths only have their place when we experience them. You can say, well, God is all powerful and God is in control and God is sovereign. But when you're in that emergency room, when you're in that fill in the blank, when you're in that Eric situation where his cousin, his cousin's widow is alone, she doesn't need someone to tell her that God loves her and God has everything. She doesn't need a propositional truth. What I'm going to share is a resource that is so far superior and is closer than we could ever imagine. Matthew 11, 28 to 30. There's a massive context for this that you don't even need to know the context for this, but Jesus has just pronounced cursing on the wicked religious leaders because they have rejected him. Now, they rejected him. Now, were they teaching the truth? Were the religious leaders teaching the truth? Were the Pharisees and the scribes teaching the truth? Yes or no? Anybody? Were they teaching the truth? Some of it. Okay. I would say they knew the truth back and forth. At least when it comes to the facts, they knew it far superiorly than any of us could ever even imagine. But they missed the whole message. Now, there were people that were following them, right? There were people that were listening to them. And they were, as Jesus said, they were like sheep without a shepherd. And you can imagine that many of them were trying to do the truth. They were trying to live up to this religious standard. And some of you, that's where you were born into a family that was like that. You grew up in a church maybe that was like that. Maybe you were coming from a place like that. And I am in recovery, big time, from that. But listen to how different that, listen to, in that context, what Jesus says. He says, and this is a command, this isn't like a nice fuzzy suggestion. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your, say it out loud. For my yoke is easy. I wonder how many worn out people, well, they're not even going to church anymore because what they heard or what they were told was a way of life that was a yoke that's not easy. It's not light. Listen to this again in the Amplified Version. I spent some time this summer with my grandmother. And my grandmother is in the presence of Jesus for a few years. But there's a box that was given to me a couple years ago after she passed, and I haven't been able to open it. It's a long story, but I felt like I needed to hear from her. And in the top of that box, inside the box, was her Bible. One of many of her Bibles, but it was her main everyday reading Bible. She loved the Amplified Version. Listen to this in the Amplified Version. Come to me, all who are weary and heavily burdened, and the Amplified kind of adds some commentary. That's what it is. Burdened by religious rituals that provide no peace. And I will give you rest, refreshing your souls with salvation. I think, unfortunately, it says that because I don't think that's what Jesus meant. But if we just said refreshing your souls, I think that would suffice. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, following me as my disciple. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest, renewal, blessed quiet for your souls. And I'm not going to read it this morning, but Jeremiah 6:16, the context there, we went through Jeremiah a couple years ago. And through Jeremiah, God says, people turn back to the former ways. You know, Jeremiah was seeking renewal in the people, and he was saying, turn back and you will find refreshment for your soul, rest for your soul. And the people said, no. You just read it in there. They said, nope, no thanks. It's like my niece. She's beautiful. She's so cute. How old is Caitlin? She's 8 or 9 or something like that. And her mom, you know, my sister-in-law, many of you know Annie. We hung out at the pool a little bit, you know, over the summer. And Annie would be like, Caitlin, come on, we got to go. No! Cracks me up every time. I don't think it was cracking up the Lord. I don't think the Lord cracks up necessarily when we say no. But what I want to help us do is figure out maybe a new perspective on how to approach this. So for years I read that and I heard, come to Jesus and he'll take the weight off. Usually thinking Jesus meant ultimate rest in the future, as in the Amplified Version it says, rest for your souls through salvation, which of course it doesn't say that, but many take it that way. Like in the future, as in when you die. Now, as it turns out, I did some research in this, that is not encouraging at all. Nobody responded to that, but let me just say that again. It is not encouraging to hear that you're going to find rest for your souls when you die. And in fact, and this is, Laura and I came from a place where, like, the evangelistic method was, hey, Serge, hey, do you know where you're going to go when you die? How old are you, Sergio? Yeah, when you're 22, unless you go to a funeral, you're not thinking about where you're going to go when you're dying, and you hope it's a long way off. The only person that is encouraging to is the thief on the cross. He knows he's about to die. And so Jesus makes that immediate promise. Hey, do you know where you're going to go when you die? That's Ed's paraphrase. That's kind of what Jesus said there. But otherwise, that's not encouraging. Many think it could be rest like an exit ramp from effort. But that's not what the passage says at all. Look at it again. We've got to, in context, right? We talk about it all the time. Whatever Jesus is saying at the beginning and how what he's promising here has to connect. He can't be talking about one thing, one type of rest, and then a different kind of rest, and it has to really make sense. Jesus doesn't say, look at this again, Jesus doesn't say, lay down your burden. He doesn't say, let go and let God. He says, take my yoke. So let's reflect on that for a few minutes. The diagnosis is he's saying this to weary and burdened people. He didn't open his invitation by calling out the sinful. Brothers and sisters, my friends, the Pharisees were good at that. They were really good. Oh, sinner, where's the rocks? He calls out the tired and weary and heavily burdened. One commentator helps differentiate the two, right? Weary and heavy burden, these two descriptors here. Quote, the one term implies toil and the other endurance. The one refers to the weary search for truth and for relief from a troubled conscience. You ever do something you know you're not supposed to do and you sin, you do that thing again, and maybe it's just me, but my natural response is to try to do something good. Satisfy that bad feeling. Make that bad feeling go away. The other refers to the heavy load of observances that give no relief, and perhaps also the sorrow of life, which, apart from the consolations of a true faith, not just a belief in Jesus, are so crushing. You may not feel like that completely this morning, but I think if most of us are honest, we wrestle with some of that. And you might have even thought this week or even this morning, I don't know if I can measure up, or when am I gonna be like fill in the blank? When am I gonna get there? Jesus makes all these promises, says all these things, but I'm not really experiencing that. Jesus was not describing bad people who fail morally. He was describing most of us who are not failing morally, although you might be failing morally, okay? Which is also pertinent to what Jesus is saying. I'm not saying it's okay to fail morally, but that's not the context. That's not the people that he was speaking. He was speaking to plenty of those people too, right? Prostitutes and et cetera, sinners, and where we all come from, ultimately. But most are tired in ways that a good night's sleep, a vacation, a sermon, some quiet time, and a prayer are not going to fix. There's got to be more. If this Christian thing is real, and I think Dallas Willard's contribution to many, many, many things is mainly that you have to experience it. Jesus is saying there's something that we have to take on, and that comes with a promise. Another commentator adds this, quote, this invitation, Jesus' call to come to him, recalls Jeremiah 31:25. Oh, Jeremiah. Where Yahweh, the Lord, offered his people rest in the new covenant. Oh, that's what we're here to experience, right? We're living in new covenant days. The weary are those who have struggled long and toiled hard. The heavy laden are those who stagger under excessive burdens. And I would add, especially the excessive burden of religion or religious activity in and of itself. The promise heard through Jeremiah 700 years before Jesus fulfilled it was that God himself would refresh or restore the weary and satisfy the faint. This has always been the Lord's posture to those who feel weak and tired and worn out. Listen to what God said through Jeremiah. This is what the Lord Almighty. So is that important? Yeah, the Lord is Almighty. Listen to what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. When I bring them back from captivity, the people in the land of Judah and in its towns will once again use these words. The Lord bless you. You prosperous city, you sacred mountain. People will live together in Judah and all its towns, farmers and those who move about with their flocks. I will refresh the weary and satisfy the faint. Always been the Lord's desire. Now, unfortunately, the NIV misses the two references to soul here in verse 25. I don't have this on the screen, but the ESV notes, look at verse 25, right here. For some reason, they miss two uses of the word soul. It's the Hebrew word nephesh. For I will satisfy the weary soul, and every languishing soul I will replenish. Unfortunately, it's an unfortunate miss. Now, before we go further, if your soul feels weary or faint, even languishing this morning, hear this. Jesus isn't disappointed. He's not waiting for you to get it all together. Listen to this. A weary and burdened soul is the doorway in, not the thing keeping you out. Let me say that again. A weary and burdened soul is the doorway in. We could say into the kingdom, if we define kingdom as his will, wherever it is reigning. Not the thing keeping you out. Your weariness, your worn outness, you feel your soul is just, that's the doorway in. That means you might actually be closer than you can even imagine. Jesus has something to say to the weary and burdened. This is good news. It's such good news that it's actually central to our faith, the Christian faith. Listen carefully to the invitation. Here's where the passage shifts and most Christians check out. And I know we're going to go maybe a little bit longer here this morning. Just please don't judge today's message as normal necessarily, okay? Just give me a little sabbatical comeback grace. I know you will. Jesus wasn't mushy or soft about what's required. There are a lot of Christians, there are a lot of churches, they're mushy on this stuff that Jesus says. He was demanding. He was demanding, but in the most benevolent way. Verse 29, take my yoke upon you. You weary, worn out, languished souls, take my yoke on you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Jesus says, take my yoke. Now, a yoke is a wooden device that represents submission to another's rule. It's used in many different contexts. It was used in slavery, like the head, the yoke, stock kind of thing. But it is most well known as a farming image. Now, this is a very crude image. You can't even see the word. This is terrible. What in the world with today's technology? Why would Pastor Ed put up something like that? But it's okay, because I just want you to see these. I want you to see it this way. Two oxen harnessed together, submitted to the farmer's will. Farmers have a very specific practice. I don't know this because of my experience, but I read about it, okay? And you can read about it. This isn't a pastors made it up kind of thing, okay? This is very typical. What they do is they yoke a young ox, a full size, but a young ox, an untrained ox, next to a mature ox who already knows the work way of life for the ox. The young ox didn't learn by being told what to do. Hey, you dumb ox, come on, get out, get out. You could talk to the ox all day. You could show the ox YouTube videos, pictures. You could talk to the ox all day. Hey, ox, come on. Like, don't you know the right, That's not how it works. The young ox learns by staying close and doing what the mature ox does, whether they like it or not, because they're so close. They're yoked. It matches the pace of the one beside it. The young ox is walking together with the mature ox. That reframes what rest means here. It's deeper than fatigue relief. I needed a little bit of that. Maybe you need a little bit of that. Maybe you need some of that because you've said yes to too many things, or you're just doing too much. Or it just so happens that you may have an extraordinary load in your career. Some of you really are. I did UPS delivery for a season before we started the church. And what I learned from that was I worked 6 days a week, and church was so I needed to walk in, limp in, and just get a little charged up as much as I could. I couldn't volunteer. I couldn't do anything else. And some of you might be, I don't want you to feel bad, because maybe that is what you need a little bit of, for sure. But what Jesus is talking about is rest from the burden of having to make life work out right. What we learn in Jesus' yoke, beyond acting and living like him, which is central, is to hand outcomes over to God, surrendering them to his will, like the young ox is completely surrendered in the yoke to the will of the farmer or the big ox next to it. We accept that we don't have in ourselves the strength to make things turn out right. And even our suffering is reframed because we can entrust ourselves into the loving care of a Creator who never leaves us. He won't fail. No, he won't. That's the heart of my burden is light. The burden isn't the work itself, it's carrying the outcome of the work. And so someone like me who likes to control things has a harder time with that. Jesus removes that second burden. He removes completely the burden for the outcome that the culture puts on us, the churches, maybe family, parent, friend, any number of people can put on us their will. This is why the phrase "learn from me" matters so much. It's the phrase most of us skip right past on our way to "I will give you rest." In fact, I think I've missed it almost completely until this summer. Completely. The yoke is training, not exemption. Jesus says, take my yoke and learn from me. Go enter into the training portico. Portico? That's not even, I don't know what I just meant. Protocol, I don't know what word I was looking for, but the process, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Enter into this training program, if you will. Don't like the word program there either. But it's really an invitation into a whole different way of ordering our lives with God. Now, the secret of the easy yoke is simply this. Simply. Living the way Jesus lived his entire life. Not just imitating isolated moments of virtue. We've all tried that. Oh, if I could just love my neighbor a little bit more, if I could just be a little more gracious, if I could just be a little more patient, God, How about these prayers? God, just help me to be different. And all the time he's saying, well, I've told you, like, I've invited you into that. I told you exactly what to do in order to be different. You got to do this, 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 and this. Or that's the wrong way to say it. I've given you these vast resources so you can experience a completely different way of life. Dallas Willard said it this way: you cannot sprint into Christ-likeness in a crisis if you haven't trained for it in the unremarkable hours. Think about that. You don't improvise gentleness under pressure. I mean, when this wheel came off over here, and whoever, at least my 3 sons heard it, probably some of you, right? And when the wheel fell off, and I'm like, okay, God, 10 more, just give me 10 more things that are outside of my control. See, it was in that I wasn't ready enough in that moment. I wasn't ready. Thankfully, I'm in process, and I was pretty quickly convicted, and the Lord was like, I'm with you. You don't suddenly become non-anxious in a hard conversation because you decide to be. You either have been training for that moment in your ordinary Tuesdays or not. Willard's diagnosis of most of our exhaustion is this, quote, we skip the discipline required to live this way, and then we exhaust ourselves trying to force Christ-like behavior without the training that actually makes that possible. That was truer of me before the sabbatical than I wish I could admit. I wasn't unfaithful. I was too hurried. And if I'm 100% honest, I was yoked to things and interests and work and distractions, basically trying to produce fruit that can only grow out of proximity and closeness to Jesus. Remember the yoke? It's close. Take my yoke and learn from me. The one who promised to grow the fruit on the branches of all those who abide in him. I wasn't the non-anxious, gentle, slower-moving man, husband, father, and pastor that God was calling me to be. Now, I didn't change overnight, and I'm still and will always be a slow work in progress. But I've taken his yoke as best as I understand it now, and I'm learning from him, and I'm in process, like many of you. So here's the promise. What does Jesus really promise? Again, in the Amplified Version, 29 and 30, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, following me as my disciple, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest, renewal, blessed, quiet for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and my burden is light. Now, Jesus didn't promise less to do, although most of us should probably do less. He promised rest for your soul. The burden was never really the task list. The burden was carrying the outcome of the task list. The career advancing. It's got to advance this way, right? Like I'm doing this and it should work out, right? I'm doing this and it should work out. How about the marriage working? Some of us know even recently, it didn't work out. The kids turning out right. Now, of course, my kids. Paul, did you meet my kid? I mean, that was he was like, oh, I mean, man, you're judging my kids right there, Paul. No, I'm just kidding. They are great kids. I thank God for my kids. They are. The church growing. We're about to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. This isn't what we envisioned 10 years ago, but this is not what we envisioned 10 years ago. As a pastor, the sermon landing, Steve preached 2 sermons. By the way, his second sermon was the most watched sermon of all July. So go watch it if you didn't. Did it land? Did it do what I wanted it to do? Did people respond? Did people come and talk to me? And that's quite, whatever it is. The good life. We're all experiencing that, right? We've all got it. Jesus didn't promise to do your work for you or that your life would work out in a certain way. He said and he promised he will carry the part of the weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. The outcome. Again, Willard names the alternative bluntly. He says, quote, "An exhausted, ceaselessly laboring soul is usually a soul that isn't properly rooted in God, a soul running on its own strength." And I think that really summarizes a lot of what I felt 3 months ago. Busy, faithful, sincere, and mostly running on my own strength. And I would add, trying to control most of it. And specifically, trying to control the outcome. 1 John puts words to what it looks like on the other side of that. 1 John 5:3. In fact, brothers and sisters, this is something we have to experience. And so if you're not experiencing this, you should be asking some of the questions that I'm going to help you ask. He says, in fact, this is love for God, to keep His commands. And His commands are not burdensome. Not burdensome. Not because obedience is easy or cheap, because it is difficult and costly. Obedience is not burdensome because we're not carrying it alone and we're not carrying the outcome at all. I can obey Him, not all the time perfectly, certainly not, but I am expected. Jesus expects us to obey Him. And certainly John did. And he says, oh, you claim to love God, but you're not. He says, you claim to love God whom you can't see, but you can't even love your brother whom you can see? Now, we love each other in this room, but there's some other brothers and sisters that, you know what I'm guilty of often? Cursing. Not like a curse word, but I do that to my neighbors all the time. I've been really convicted about this. I drive, pull in, and I see something, and at least in my heart, but often out of my mouth, I say something that's like, doesn't even have to be a word. You ever do that? You pull in, or you see a neighbor, you see a friend, you see someone, you get an email, you see that name. Excuse me as I spill my water all over the place. And inside your heart, it's not even a word. You're just like, cursing. Is there a person on this earth that God doesn't want you and me to love? Even that person? Even that person that wants my life over? I mean, He's pretty clear. Love your enemies. So what's keeping us from experiencing this unburdened rest? I want to give you a moment that really reframed it for me, and I promise I'm going to land the plane here. It comes from a story that I know some of you have heard before. It's in John Ortberg's book, Soul Keeping. Ortberg, he's early in his ministry. He's kind of a young minister. He's struggling. He had met Dallas Willard. He became kind of a friend and mentor. And he is exhausted and overloaded. He's working in this big church. And he called him and he asked him this direct question. What do I need to do to become spiritually healthy? Spiritually alive. I'm not feeling spiritually alive. Maybe you feel like that this morning. There was a long pause, and a book that I know Karen and I have read a number of times, and he said, you need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Ortberg, half joking, he pressed it. Oh, okay, all right, but what else? Okay, what else do I need to do? Long pause again. There's nothing else. Hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life of our day. Now sit with that for a minute. He didn't say sin or doctrine or even busyness himself. See, hurry, the internal condition of trying to move faster than the pace grace was ever meant to move. Hurry is when I'm going faster. Now, sometimes we need to speed up because we're just too slow. We're just sitting around and we're expecting God to just somehow send us an email with the answers. But for most of us, we need to pull back because the internal condition, what's going on in my soul, is moving faster than what grace can do in my life. And so I've got to say no to something. I've got to pull back. I've got to do. I can't tell you what it is that you need to do. But there's a long list of practices that, they've been around for a couple thousand years. There's been practices that churches have been wrestling with for thousands of years now, 2,000 years. And all of a sudden we have this advance in technology and we think, well, forget all that. I can just live. I'm living in the 21st century. Well, that is what produces the weary and burdened souls Jesus was talking to in Matthew 11. Jesus didn't say, "Come to me, all who are sinful." He said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened." Willard was telling us that hurry is the modern engine that manufactures this condition. You can be sincere, giving great effort to serve and do many religious things. You can fill your life with Jesus-y things and Jesus-y activity, or just well-intentioned works and still be way too hurried. And hurry has a way of hollowing out and wearying and burdening our souls. Rest in this passage isn't primarily about doing less, it's about doing life at a different pace. Yoked to someone who has never once in the history of the universe been in a hurry. So, what we ought to be asking ourselves is, well, why BH? I'm sure Eric probably said this too in all of his messages, but you want to get to the message and say, okay, yes, but how? And you're saying, oh, we've been here way too long, and I apologize for that in some ways, and I promise that we will not have sermons this long in the future. But here's my central takeaway from Sabbatical. Here's what I want to build the next season of my life and leadership here at Restoration Church around. We think the Christian life itself is burden, but it isn't. Our unyoked, hurried life is the burden. And as I was driving to meet Karen just on Friday, just meditating on these things, it's really when it dawned on me that the problem for me is the yoke. I'm yoked to other things, too many things, lesser things. And probably for most of us, we're not living a life that is yoked to the real person of Jesus Christ, the real resurrected, alive Jesus who is closer to you right now in this moment. When you say yes to Jesus, when you pray to Jesus, I want you to have a new image in your mind. And we're going to pray here in just a minute. I want you to just envision that Jesus is, that your prayer, whether your eyes are open or not, your prayer is opening a door and Jesus just walked in and he's standing right in front of you, with you, maybe beside you with his arm around you. Because he is. He actually is. And we know that not because some old book said it. We know it because hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people saw him raised from the dead. And since then, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people around the world in every language and context and culture, they didn't just hear some propositional truth. Just believe in Jesus and you'll go to heaven when you die. That's not encouraging to most of the world anyway, unless you're in homes of people that are about to die. It's totally different when you open up your life and accept the invitation to Jesus. Yes, Jesus, you're calling me, yes, to give me rest, but you're calling me to put a yoke on my life that ties me to a way of life that differentiates me from everybody else in the world. And Jesus said, the people in your life are going to see that, and they're going to know that you're my disciple. And they're going to glorify God. How many people do you know that are living like that? Well, I can tell you that there are a lot of people, maybe some of you in this room, there are people in your community, your neighborhood, your workplace, people that you know and love whose souls are just on the last bit of hope. And we have the answer. But I think there's something about this message that God's working in my life that I hope you're hearing, even in some long-windedness today, that you'll say, and you'll enter into the training course with me. The yoke, see, is apprenticeship. It's a commitment to be a disciple of Jesus. And that commitment comes with a promise of rest. The rest doesn't come from exemption from work. It comes from proximity and pace. Staying close to Jesus long enough to learn his rhythms. So the question we need to wrestle with, I said, I want to give you I want to help you with this because this is what I'm wrestling with. And by wrestle with, I mean we need to chew on this and think about it and pray about it and talk to some trusted people that are going in the same direction with us, almost on a daily basis, even moment by moment, with this question. And the WWJD bracelets were very close to this, okay? But as I'm thinking about how I have a neighbor, a newish neighbor, who I know couldn't give a rip about our family or any other family. I just know that. I know their worldview. And they show it by their actions. And I have cursed them, and my boys have heard me curse them in my heart. And so I'm asking, okay, well, if Jesus lived here, and this was Jesus' neighbor, how would Jesus do neighboring on Chatterley Terrace if he were in my shoes? He wouldn't be cursing them. He'd be figuring out a way to meet them where they are, probably not even talking about their sin or belief system or anything like that. But he would be probably trying to find a way to build a bridge to show them that he loves them and that actually what they believe doesn't match up with that. Okay, Lord. And so now when I pull in and I see their car parked over the line, and I say, oh, Lord, help me to love them. Show me how to love them. Show me how to love them in a way that I know you would if you were in my shoes. Fill in the blank. Write that down. Take a snapshot of this slide and fill in the blank and just start practicing that in a prayerful way. What would Jesus do in my office in response to this gossip, this problem, this boss that's terrible, this manager? How could this person be treating me this way? Well, how would Jesus, and we don't have to wonder how Jesus would do it because we have his life that we can study. And I've missed it so much. Brothers and sisters, I was so wrong about so many things about the Sermon on the Mount. So wrong. When Jesus said, flourishing are the peacemakers. Flourishing are those who mourn. Flourishing are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Do you think that that's meant for some future generation, or that's meant to convict us because we fall so short? That's how I always took it. You can't. I'm rereading it, and I'm reading it with fresh eyes, and I can't come up with that interpretation anymore. Jesus expects us to live exactly like this. And we can. But to get there, we need new and read ancient practices, rhythms. Willard and many others call them disciplines for our lives. I'm starting to understand this in a whole new way. We'll wrestle with that for the next few months and maybe years, but for today, this is the last slide, I promise. I want you to take just one practical step in response today. Here's 4 of them. First, name your hurry. Don't even need to say much more about that. Name your hurry. Number 2, pick one unhurried practice or discipline. Maybe something small and repeatable. Maybe just slow your morning down a little bit. Maybe drive in silence at the speed limit. I'm working on that. Maybe eat meals without your phone even within reach. This is not just about relaxing, but framing, slowing down to yoke yourself to his training. Paul said in 1 Timothy 4:7, train yourself for godliness. How do we do that? Well, all we have to do is read the life of Jesus. How did he do it? He shows us. And then he teaches us when you pray, when you fast, when you do these things, when you give, when you fellowship, when you get together, all these different practices. Number 3, hand over one outcome. Name one thing you're currently trying to force out to turn right. A relationship, a decision, a diagnosis, a kid. This week, practice surrendering to God in prayer. Number 4, stay close, not just informed. The invitation was never learn about Jesus. It was learn from, directly from Jesus. Ask yourself this week what it would look like to stay closer to him. Not know more about him, but to be nearer to his tangible presence. I haven't arrived. For 3 months, I got to practice being yoked to Jesus instead of yoked to my own pace, and I never want to go back. And you don't want me to go back. And I want you to experience the same kind of rest for your souls that I've been experiencing. So brothers and sisters, take his yoke. It's light, it's easy, it's a blessing. Learn his pace and let him carry out what was never yours to carry alone. I'm going to pray. I was thinking about doing a Pastor Jeff, but I think we need to wrap it up. And so Sergio is going to lead us, and I'll be here as long as you want to hang out and pray and talk and ask questions. If you got to run, your lunch is about to burn, I won't hold it against you. I hope this has been an encouragement to you. And I hope that together we'll be on this new journey together. And I promise, come back next week and the sermon will be much shorter. This is what happens when you preach kind of a topical kind of thing, you know. And I just figured you'd give me some extra grace, and so thank you so much for that. But let's pray and really evaluate in talking to Jesus right now in this moment what he is, or where he is leading us. Jesus, thank you for your promises. And forgive me, I feel like I've stolen some time from my brothers and sisters here this morning, and while I half joke about it, it is serious. And some of us, we just can't handle sitting for so long and hearing these words. I pray, however, that we would hear from and encounter you this morning. Number of people in this room I don't know so well. I don't know how deeply they have encountered you. I know some probably feel like they're up against a wall, hitting the wall constantly. I pray you'll just pour out wisdom, pour out courage this morning for every one of us to do whatever it is we need to do, to yoke ourselves to you, because that is where we find the peace and love and joy and rest for our souls that you promise. Over and over again, your people in the Old Testament we read, they said, no, no, no. You called them over and over again, over and over, so graciously, so merciful, to turn back to you, and you promised over and over again to refresh. For 2,000 years, many of us, Lord, many, would rather be yoked to religion, would rather be yoked to trying to control the outcomes. We yoke ourselves to what's on the outside, how we look, how we come across. Do we say the right words? Are we getting it right? Are we doing the right things? People all around us, Lord, just hurting, worn out, and would describe their lives in much harsher language. So, Lord, help us in this moment to experience your nearness. I pray that everyone in this room would know that whether their eyes are closed or not, or wherever they are, whatever the outward circumstances are, that they would know that you're right there with them, not because they read it somewhere, but they know your presence. They experience your presence. They have inexplicable rest for their souls. They have inexplicable joy in the midst of chaos. Whether it's an emergency room or a backyard or an office, flood our lives, Lord. Flood our lives with your presence. We know that you don't just do it, you require. You command us. Come to me. Take my yoke. So, Lord, in response, help us to just do what you're leading us to do. And as a church, help us to wrestle with what these things mean in our lives in the days and months and years ahead. Thank you for promising to be with us and actually doing it.